Good morning, Rabbi Isai. So good to be back. Rabbi Isai, it's a sad day today. We are finishing one of the best prokim in Shas, Elu Trefus. We're holding up Samach Zayin Amud Aleph. We did a bunch of lines over here, but we could go back a little bit just because, there's people that don't really, they're not holding. So we're discussing a sugya of different types of worms that you could eat. You could legally eat, halachically you could eat. These are worms that grow, that were produced, or they were born in a vessel. We're going to see later on also worms that were born in fruit, detached fruit, not detached fruit.
Spontaneous generation?
No, we're not talking about spontaneous generation. There is no spontaneous generation. The Rahman already discussed that based on today's science, we know there's no such thing as spontaneous generation. What the Gemara calls spontaneous generation, regeneration or generation, spontaneous generation, the Gemara means what the Gemara knew then, basically to the naked eye, that there was, if you don't see the eggs, then it's considered spontaneous generation. Then you're allowed to eat it. You're allowed. It doesn't matter. So it doesn't really matter how it was created or not. But anyway, we're not going into that sugya. The point is that any worm that was created in the ocean or in the nachal, here, that's the picture I just showed you. Oh, the nachal. I guess that's why I showed you subconsciously. My last picture in Switzerland, here's a nachal. And my oldest son, was drinking from the stream. I said, you're not supposed to drink from the stream. It says in Eretz Yisrael, in the streams don't drink. That we found out he was right. You're allowed to drink in the Alps, you're allowed to. It's not a problem. There's something similar, almost. It's the next step down. It's charitzin. It's water that comes from the ground, that comes up, it keeps on moving. It's not the same water, it's moving. Then you have non-moving water. It's water that is stationary. You created a bar, a shiach, a ma'ara, different types of, what are they called? No, not receptacles.
Bodies of water.
Reservoirs. You have different types of ways to keep water, through the summer or whatever. So one of them is round, one of them is rectangle. The other one has a cover. It's more like a cave. Great. The worst of the worst, and for us, and now we're looking at the best of the best, in terms of eating worms, are worms that were born in a vessel. Okay, so we had a klal. We learned this halacha, that the worms that were created in a vessel, that you're allowed to eat it. We learned it from a klal pratu klal. So that what? If you look at the top pasuk, it says bamayim, bayamim ubenachalim. Bamayim is general, all waters, all bodies of water, doesn't matter what. And then there was a prat, bayamim ubenachalim. The Gemara asked, but bayamim ubenachalim, the prat is all the way at the end. It should be a sandwich. It should be klal, prat, klal. Or we have klal, prat. And that's the top of the Gemara. The Gemara says, hotel prat b'neim, we're mamish in the middle of a word, but it doesn't matter. It's as if, pretend that the prat goes in between the two klals, and then you get a legitimate klal upratu klal. B'mayim klal, b'yam u'nechol prat, b'mayim chazer kol, klal upratu klal, yata donol kol prat, my problem for mayim noivim, afkol mayim noivim, water that has a source, keeps on moving, my rabbi. And what am I saying? That is also to eat worms, charitzin u'ni'itzin li'yisura. The number 2 one, the pasuk talks about oceans. We're going to add these guys also. They're also asur. Umaymiyat, and what type of worms could you eat? Bayrois, shichin, uma'arois, leteira, these guys. Okay, so this is where we're holding. Beima, ask the Gemara, ma'aprat mafurish mayim gedelin al gavi karka. It's gathered, water is gathered on top of the ground. I've called mayim gedelin al gavi karka, my rabbi. I feel the bar, shichin maris, the surah. Maybe the bar, the shiach should be asur. Umaymiyat, miyat kalim. Let's take one more. Let's do 3 that are asur. Oceans, charitzin, that come from the ground, and even a bar shiach ma'ara that it doesn't come from the ground, but it's stationary, it's there, it's a body of water, so to speak. Maybe that should be asur. And only one type of water that the worms grow in, they're mutter, and that is in a kli. Says Gemara, no. We already learned. We have here. The pasuk says ezet toichlu. That adds one more thing, and we have a klal pratu klal. So now we have two things that we added. We have 4 types of waters. You have to add two types of waters to it. So the worst of the worst is the kli that we got from the klal pratu klal, and then we also have. Sorry, not this one. We have ezet toichlu, which is the second one, and we're going to add the boiros. Shichnomares, which are stationary, they're very similar to Kli. Debate Rabbi Shmuel Tana, and then now the Gemara just goes over very, very similar. So when we have a klal, by the way, this is going to be over very soon. So again, just for the few people that have trauma from this stuff, they shouldn't because it's very simple. The difference between a klal, prat, and klal is, I mentioned it the other day, we'll go over it again quickly. Klal, prat, klal. The Torah says, all types of water, you're allowed to eat the worms in them. Then the Torah says, no, only the ones from the ocean. Then the Torah says again, another klal. So when you learn klal, prat, klal, it adds many things to the prat. It's not just the oceans, it's many. And it has to just be similar to the prat. But when you do a Ribui, miyut ribui, it's the same exact thing as a klal pratu klal. It's just throughout Shas you're consistent. You're going to either learn you're Rebbe Akiva, you're going to learn the entire Shas, klal pratu klal. You never do ribui, miyut ribui. If you're a type of person, a type of Tana that does ribui, miyut, miyut, so he does it throughout Shas. What's the difference though? The difference is that a ribui, miyut, ribui, you get to include more stuff and you only take out one thing. The thing that's the furthest away from what we're discussing. So if we're discussing an ocean or ocean, what's the polar opposite of an ocean? A kli. So we're only taking off one thing. Here's a interesting kasha on the side. I noticed in the Mesilas Shas, he says, if you ever notice in the Yigimel Midas, how come it doesn't mention Ribui Ribui? So he brings the Taisus. Okay. So says the Gemara. So we're just going to do the same thing, pretty much, very similar. The Be'er Shmuel Tana, B'mayim Shtei Pa'amim. If you want to look at the pasuk, we call it a klal. He calls it a Ribui. Ain't a klal prat, el a ribu miyat. B'mayim riba, b'yam rechal miyat, b'mayim chazav riba. What we call a klal prat, a klal, he calls it a ribu miyat ribu. Ribu miyat riba akol, v'riba riba akol. My Rabbi, what is he adding? Charitzin itzim li surah. He's saying that the water that's most similar to an ocean, the worms that grow in them are aser. Umay miyat. And what are you allowed to eat? More stuff. Same question that we had a second ago. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you should not be able to eat the worms from a bar, but you should be able to eat the worms from a kli. That can be. Since we have two limudim, we have this pasuk, which is a ribui, miyut, ribui. We could actually change it if we want. And we have this miyut as a toichlu, so we have two miyutim. They include two different types of waters. The klal, brother klal, we know already, comes to include a kli, and zet toichlu comes to include the boiros. As the Gemara, Ve'ipachana, say that charitzim are mutter and bar is aser. No, because the time at this year, the time at this year by Yehuda, my reisal the rabbis bar yishchum ha'oz la teri loitz charitzim is l'isura. It makes more sense. Because what's the most similar to a kli? A bar. The water is not going anywhere. It's just a giant kli in the ground. The water is constantly moving in a charetz. It gets water from the, how do you say tahaim in English? Groundwater. It keeps on moving. All right. So you have these two psukim. And the Gemara mentioned to us, just in passing, that worms that grow in a kli are mutter to eat. One pasuk is straight out. One pasuk is more. It's not as mefurish. Which one? So we're gonna have a machlokes hillel. You hear? Hey, sounds very mefurish. Here, yeshloi. Rabbi said, just I'm showing you the pasuk. There shouldn't be. You see in purple, asher loi. That's yeshloi. You see over here in the next pasuk yod, it says ein loi. There's yeshloi and ein loi. That the Gemara asked, like, can we figure it out ourselves? If you have to have it, you have to have snaber v'keskeses to eat, then certainly you have to. Then if you don't have, you can't eat. And if you don't have snaber because you can't eat, so if you do have, you could eat. That was the other day. Hey, sons of mefurish, the Gemara is going to explain how and where. Here, one man Dharma says that the first pasuk, Asher Loi, is the straight out over here. You can see that you're allowed to eat worms. Ve'ein Loi Sasam, the other pasuk Yud, is not as mefurish. My time at the man Dharma Yesh Mefurish. What's the pshat? When you learn it from the first pasuk, that's mamish mefurish. That is the source, the pasuk test. My time at the man Dharma Yesh Mefurish. Why does he say that the second pasuk is the one? The higher the gemucha hey. If you think about it, the Torah says that worms that grow or fish that grow in the ocean, you're allowed to eat if they have snaper v'keskeses. What about if they grow in a kli? So we're learning if they grow in a kli, you're allowed to eat them even if they don't have snaper v'keskeses. Maybe the pshat is the exact opposite. Fish that have snaper v'keskeses grow in the ocean, you're allowed to eat. And if they grow in a kli, even with snaper v'keskeses, you're not allowed to eat. That even makes more sense. You know, we're used to like not eating things. So anything that grew in an aquarium, a salmon that grew, that was, how do you say grew? That was raised, cultivated in an aquarium. Maybe the Torah is saying you're not allowed to eat it. Only that in an ocean you're allowed to eat, but that in an aquarium not. Fish farm. You're telling me that the exact opposite. That if it has snaper v'keskeses in the ocean, you're allowed to eat it. And if it grows up in a vessel, an aquarium, even without a snaper v'keskeses, if shrimp, you're allowed to eat it. So that's why he says it makes more sense the second pasuk. But we're learning from the second pasuk. If you're just going to learn from the first pasuk, I would say the opposite. That you're not allowed to eat even fish, even a salmon, a kosher fish with snaper v'keskeses, you're not allowed to eat from a farm, from an aquarium. That's why I need the second pasuk is the more mefurish one. Okay, that's it. We're done. Now we're going on to another sugya of very interesting stuff of worms. Omar Avuna. Just want to point out that if you eat a small, tiny worm, a Jewish guy on the trip, he took a berry off the side. He says, taste it. I said, I can't taste it. Maybe it has a worm. Trust me, it's good stuff. So I want to say that eating a small worm, people, strawberries, what Kabir Eddie, the OU says, you have the OU. So if the Badat said you have to scrub it twice and with soap, dish soap, and the whole thing, it's not so posh to eat strawberries. Chumras of machmirim. If you eat a small worm, it could be a greater isser than eating a full plate of pork. That tiny little worm. Stop. Keep that in mind. It's not a joke. 24/7. No. Depends. Depends on the what. It's a whole berry. It's a bigger problem than pork. So says the Gemara. Let's start. Do not pour beer. Special date beer. They made beer out of dates. It seems from the Gemara it's nice and thick because they wouldn't use regular sifters because it wouldn't even go through. So what would they do? They would put a bunch of toothpicks, wood chips, mitzivyasa, wood, burta at night. Why? What is going on here? If there's worms that grow in the beer, drink it, geschmack, very appetizing. Wormy beer, protein beer. Very good. Protein beer. Bit beheter. But if the worm comes out, that's the whole yesod of worms. If it grows in something and it stayed in that something and it was detached from the ground, great. But once it's shoyretz al haaretz, it walks on the ground. The Gemara is going to say how much in the ground. What if it's in the air? What if here? But if it walks on top of your wood chips for a moment and then plops itself back into the protein beer, then it's also for you to eat it. Now it's at night. You didn't notice if there's any worms or no worms. So now you shouldn't do this at night. But if it's during the day and you don't see any worms, drink. You see them swimming around there, it's okay. They most likely they grew up, the chinuch and everything was in the beer. Then it fell into the cup. As the Gemara, but even if it's in the beer cup, a lot of times worms like to walk their way up the wall of the cup and then plop back down. Says the Gemara, that's not a problem. This is how they operate. If a worm goes up and then goes back down, it's not a problem. That's how they grow. That's a good excuse, and that's a good reason to be able to eat it. The Sanya, we learned, and we just had it. You're allowed to bend down and drink straight out of a pit. And now we see in New York and all these places, you see, I remember in Camp Morris, there was like a stream, like a rock, and water came out of the rock. People, geschmack, cold water. Not a lot. So we used to take our bottle, fill it up from there, and bring it. And one Shabbos night, Friday night, I take a look at the bottle. I couldn't believe there's like 20 worms swimming in that water that I just caught off the rock. It's in there. If you don't have filtration, that's what you're going to be drinking. And I'm not saying it's usher. That's the whole discussion in New York. A few years ago in New York, they had a massive issue. But I saw it with my own eyes. I was the one that found it. Like this bottle sitting on the table. Like, whoa, what? And you see this guy just going like this. They live in the water. They swim. And they breathe water. They're like fish. So you're allowed to bend down into a bar and drink, knowing that there might be worms in there. You're allowed to eat everything that's in the water. So you'll say it's not noticeable. It's mamish to the naked eye, you can see it. But this worm maybe went up the vessel wall out of the water. It's not in the water. It says in the Torah, in the water. But once it comes out of the water, it's shoretz al haaretz. It walked on the ground. It becomes also automatically. And then it fell back in, and then you drank it. That's normal for aquatic creature to come out of the water and then back into the water. So too by us, we're not concerned about this beer worm coming out for a moment and going back in. Over there, tiny Masayah, have a raya. Kol asheretz al haaretz, l'rabois yav chushin shesinanon, these little flying insects, like little they tiny mosquitoes or little fruit flies, little shesinanon that were filtered. You're not allowed to eat the filtered flies that come out on the top of the filter, holy sinanon. But if you didn't filter, they're inside the drink. Sorry, you're allowed to eat it. Oh. Omer Shmuel, Kishus Shitlia Bi'ibel. You have some gourd that, as it was attached to the ground, it became wormy. Asur Mishul Masheretz HaShoretz Al Haaretz. Why? Because when Mechuber says Shmuel, this famous Shmuel, and we actually paskin like Shmuel. So it gives us less of a heter, Shmuel. That what? If the worms were introduced to the fruit while it was attached to the ground, attached to the tree, which is attached to the ground, that's considered a shoretz al haaretz, even though it's in the fruit, because the fruit is attached to the ground, so it's working around on the ground. Asura mishum shah. Asura mishum shah is a shoretz al haaretz. Leivim sayele. Maybe I have a right to Shmuel. The what? When it's attached to the tree, then it's also to eat that worm, even though it's inside. Huh? Attached to a tree that's attached to the ground. Ala Aretz, Lahoitzi. Lahoitzi means to give a heter. Es hazizin sheba'adoshim. You have little like mosquitoes, bugs in the lentils. Veseyatushim sheba'klisim. This is more like chickpeas, hummus. V'teilah sheba'tmarim. V'sheba'groigrois. They were created inside. These worms were, they were born inside the dates and the figs. So those are mutter. All these little yetushim are mutter. Kol hasheretz hasheretz ala aretz. L'rabbis over here. L'hoitzi means to give a heter. L'rabbis means to add to the iser. L'rabbis teilah shebikri zeisim shebikri kfanim. The ones that grow and the roots of the olives and the grapes. My la avidiv peir. L'chayr we're talking about both of them are inside the fruit. And one is attached to the tree. Attached to the tree is considered like the tree, like the ground, and mele it's aser. And if it's not attached to the tree, then it's motor. No, they're both attached to the tree. When it's attached to the fruit are oimidli talish. Fruit is something that you're about to take off the tree, so it's not considered attached to the tree. Maybe you're allowed to, but the tree itself is aser. I'm talking about the root of the tree itself, not the fruit of the tree. The root, shmamina. But we don't paskin like this. We paskin like Shmuel. Then what? So that's why people are makpid. Yes. How come people check dates and I don't know what, apricots? I don't know what. They open it up. They look. Why? So you can say, oh, what? So what? So this is a little worm, but maybe the worm came while it's attached to the tree. While it's attached to the tree, Shmuel says it's aser. You're right. If the worm was developed when it was detached from the tree recently, in the last few weeks, from the time it was cut off the tree to the time it came to your table, then it wouldn't be such a problem. But since there's a problem that maybe it developed while it's attached to the tree, so we have to be makbid. What if? Oh, so we have all these little guys here. Persho Mesa. It came out of the date and it died right away. It never had a chance to walk on the ground, Nebuch. So it's not al aretz, but it's on the aretz. Miktsasa Ma'u. It came out a little bit. La'avir Oilamau. It came out to the world. Is that considered al aretz? Teiku. What happens when you have a teiku in this situation? Savik deraisa l'chumra. But Rav Ashi legag tomorrow Ma'u will climb to the top like this guy. Legag, Garinoso, here it is, he's climbing out of the pit to the top of the pit. Mitmar here. Ooh, geschmack. Maybe that is considered, maybe came out of his house, he came out of his date and he went to another one. Maybe that's also Teiku. These worms that you find in the liver of an animal, or in the lungs of an animal. Asiri, the aser. My taima. Ma'amasu. They didn't grow. They didn't develop in the animal. They came from the outside. So Mela, there were once upon a time crawling creatures on the ground, and then they came into the animal. That doesn't make it a mutter. So if in fact they came from the world, so what does that mean they came from the world? The animal ate a bunch of hay. The hay had a bunch of worms, and it went through his digestive system. So wait a minute, it went into his digestive system, it should have came out the other way. You should find it in his feces, and whatever it's called. How do you find it how do you get to the liver? Maybe some of them get to the liver, but some of them should come out. You don't see it over there. These worms that you find in the liver, you're allowed to eat them at time in Minei Gavli. They grew, they were developed inside the animal. On Ravashi Pshitas, Pashat. Why? So I can prove it to you. How you don't see it on the other side. No, you should know the halach is that these worms are also my time when the animal falls asleep. They go into the nose, into the nostril, and they go through, and somehow they get into different parts of the body. Darnay the bisras here, you open up an animal, you find a bunch of worms in the meat. I never heard of such a thing, but I guess it's... What? Yeah, that we have that with the fish. And that's also Shaila if they came in afterwards or they developed there. The kavre here, fish. Sharion. Ravina tells his mother, don't worry about it. Leave the worms inside the fish, mix it in there, make a geshmak gefilte fish, and I'm going to eat them. What's pshat? So I heard pshat that what? Take it out. What's the problem? No. So you can say, oh, a simple pshat is he don't want to be Mitzar's mother or whatever. But another geshmak pshat is he wanted to show that the reason why he doesn't eat worms on a daily basis is not because he's an istinus and it grosses him out. He doesn't eat a worm because it's deraisa. I'm going to show when it's mutter, I eat. So then when it's aser, and I get schar. I, for instance, don't get any schar for not eating. You either. You don't get any schar for not eating a worm because you hate worms. You look at it, it's gross. No, I want schar for not eating the worm. The worms that grow in an animal are also. How come the fish the mutter? Listen to this. Listen to this chap. The problem with the worm is that it's a live worm. It's ever menachai. How can you eat a live worm? Let's say it's mutter, but it's alive. It's ever menachai. Elamai, the shchita of the animal is going to be materit, but it's alive. The animal's dead. This thing's alive. It's not uber yerachim. It's not part of the animal. When it comes to the fish, you're right, it's alive, but there's no ever menachai. Because fish themselves, you don't have to shecht. Interesting. It's something to think about. The shchita doesn't help them, so therefore there's still ever menachai. There's no ever menachai in a fish. You just gather and eat. It could be it's about the shaksu or something. But v'hanik yikol gavlon, but there yikol gavlon. And the worm on them is mutter. You're not allowed to eat a snake. Koil rabbis hashilshul besadoim l'shilshul. There's something that's like a snake, not really a snake, like a worm, a giant worm, a very long worm. It looks like a snake. Also. Al arba akrov. Interesting. They talk about it. Akrov actually has 6, but he uses 4 mainly to maneuver. This is what they call today. I think it was the most popular car ever made, the Beetle. And there's, I forgot how many, tens of thousands of types of beetles. I forgot to look it up. It's in the thousands. No, I'm talking about the type, what? Marber reglaim. In Hebrew also it's called a marber reglaim. Zenadol, it's a centipede. Why is it called a centipede? Because centipeds, it has 100 legs. Marber reglaim, zenadol. Ad kol, l'rabbis is a doima, it's a doima l'doima. Okay, very similar to similar. Tanya Rabbi Yosef, they're maskis oimer. Levyasan, dag toru. Levyasan is a kosher fish. Shenemar gav afiki moginim, tachtav chadudi cheres. Afiki moginim, elu kaskasim shaboy. These are the scales. Tachtov chadudi cheres, elus napir sheperechbem. This is how he flies through the water. Oh, I can't say this. Hadran aloch elu treifois. Hadran aloch elu treifois. Hadran aloch elu treifois. What a geschmack of perek.
Merit the schus of spreading Torah throughout the world. Sponsor a shir today. MDYsponsor.com or sponsor at MDY.com.